Live. Welcome, everyone, to another Friday Expert live stream. I'm your host, Stan Johnson at Next Level Nonprofits, and we have an incredible guest for you today. Look, if you are struggling to prove your worth to funders, they're asking questions like, well, why are you solving this problem instead of X problem? I just don't know if that's really important right now with everything going on. If these are the messages that you're getting from grant funders, from donors, from people who might give you money, I have a lady who's going to come on and help you address that. And I'm super excited to bring on Sara Orellana. She is the founder of 3Raptor Consulting, which is a super unique name. So it's actually going to be my first question. She's the founder of 3Raptor Consulting. She's very good at program design, and she's going to be really, really good at helping you develop I know it sounds really boring and really awful, and they can be really boring and really awful, but she's not going to make it boring and awful. A needs assessment to show funders that you have what it takes to get their money. Sara, welcome to the Friday Expert Livestream.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful to have you. Great way to hang out on a Friday. And this is decently casual, but we're going to chat through this and get some good advice out to our people. So first question, 3Raptor Consulting. Why?
So I love dinosaurs. I have loved dinosaurs since I was a little kid, and I wanted to be a paleontologist. But the very first semester in college, I took a paleontology class, and that was like a big no-no, and it just went like over my head and it intimidated me. So I pivoted to an English major. But I've still continued to love history, archaeology, paleontology, anything to do with that. So when it came time to naming my business, at the time I was living in Oklahoma, and believe it or not, Oklahoma is still very sexist and it's still almost back in the 1950s. And so I needed to have a company name that was gender neutral, and if anything, it leaned more towards the masculine side, and that was also very, very strong. And I also, because I believe so much in collaborations and partnerships, wanted something that represented teamwork. And as at that time, research had just come out to show that raptors actually hunted in packs, and they were pack animals and fought as pack animals, and they were the little guys, and they could take down the really big dinosaurs. So it was perfect. And then the number three is because at the time I had 3 rescue dogs. So one thing I'm very, very passionate about is rescuing dogs. And I've been rescuing dogs longer than I've been a mom, and my daughter's 21. So that can tell you something. So I'm born and raised Southern California person who's now East Coaster. I'm all about nature, animals, and dinosaurs. And that's where the name came from.
That's so fantastic. Nature, animals, and dinosaurs. All
Mhm.
right. So when I talk to nonprofit leaders a lot, one of the things they'll tell me, I was speaking to the head of a sports nonprofit, kids youth sports nonprofit, and he was telling me, look, with the federal funding cuts, with everything that's going on,
Yeah.
people look at my organization, they're like, kids sports, aren't there like more important things to be focused on right now? And but his story is really impactful. He was a sports kid growing up. He was
Mhm.
a teacher in the Bronx, and he
Okay.
saw all these kids who sports was really going to be their only purpose. Like they weren't
Mhm.
going to go be excited about academics. They weren't going to go be excited about the workforce. They could be excited about sports though. And he watched their programs get cut one after another, and he watched what happened to these kids. So we're not talking just sports. We're talking this is helping kids avoid a life of crime. This is helping kids avoid being in persistent poverty and generational poverty. This is
Mhm.
helping avoid all of this, but it comes across as just sports. So, how are founders screwing up when they're presenting their nonprofit and making funders look at it and go, that's not really serious. I don't get what you're trying to do.
Right. So, and I will say I've made this mistake before, because before I owned a business, I did work in the nonprofit sector, and I worked my way from programs up to CEO. So I have a lot of very direct hands-on experience. And one of the things that just completely ruffles my feathers is when nonprofits, especially ones that work with kids, present themselves as cute or cutesy, or use fonts that are cutesy, or use cutesy colors. Because here's the thing, and my passion is high risk kids. There's nothing cute about what you do. And every single thing that you do to engage a child is vital and important. And so it's very, very important the perspective that you cast with your nonprofit. So the first thing you need to do is really look at it from a marketing and branding perspective. Yes, it is a sports program on the surface, but when we dig down into the levels of that onion, right, what's at that core? What is that problem that you are truly solving? And when you go, and you have to understand too, as nonprofits, you almost have to have two different marketing pieces. You have the marketing piece that you take to the public to recruit them to come to your program, and that can be cute and fun, right? But then you have the marketing that you take out to the funders and to the foundations and the donors. And with that, you have to be science driven, data backed, and really just clearly state what the problem is. So when I worked with high risk youth, the way that I got funding for programs that could have sounded not needed is I talked about the lowering of crime rate, how the kids weren't home alone after school, how it was getting them involved with positive mentors, how we also had a literacy component. And I would bet you money that being a sports program, there's either some kind of reading involved or more likely math. So there's also a literacy component there. So there's a lot of things that you can say, this is what we're presenting, and we're doing it in the presentation of sports because that is what engages these kids. But there are so many things that you can present where you're talking about economic development, lowering crime rates, lowering the recidivism rate, lowering the number of kids that are in the custody of the Office of Juvenile Affairs. And you've got to take that very data-driven approach. Another key thing that you've got to remember too is you've got to present your program in the same vocabulary as the people you're presenting to. So when I would speak to community leaders, it was about community development, lowering crime rates, increasing jobs, increasing taxes. When you talk to banks, it's what's that return on investment. So you also have to be able to say the same message very clearly in almost a multitude of languages, if that makes sense, different business languages. And that's the key in getting past that front door.
So what if I don't have that data? Right? So you're
Right.
throwing all this out there. Like most founders I talk to don't have that data, or small
Mhm.
medium nonprofits. They've primarily operated off of storytelling or
Right.
networking or the power of the founder message or whatever. What if they don't have that data?
So what if I told you there's one place you can go and get it and you don't have to collect it yourself? So
Is
it's
it
super.
nonfindnonprofitdata.com? Like, do I
I
go
know,
there?
I wish. No, no, no. Specifically with children's programs. However, I have used this for free medical clinics. I've used this for food bank programs. So it works pretty much across the board for any nonprofit that's working with high risk populations. You can go to your school department and get the majority of your information and data that you need from your school department. So what you need is to make really good friends with the secretary in the superintendent's office. Now, in the state of Oklahoma, it's the OEA report, and you can go to a website. And what's beautiful about this is it's from the last year. So it's brand new, fresh data because we all know we're not supposed to use data that's more than 5 years old. You can get it by the school district, the county, and the state. And those are all the comparisons that you need to show that there's a very clear problem. And on all those reports, they have to report the number of high school dropouts. They have to report the number of people without college educations. They have to report the crime rate. They have to report something that's really important for sports programs with kids is the number of kids that are getting suspended, the number of kids that are going to detention. And
Mm.
on top of that, there's all your poverty levels. I mean, every piece of data that you think you could need is literally reported by the school district. And you just have to know what the name of that report is in your state, which you can find out through the superintendent's office. And that's the only place you need to go for that data. And it's very clear and it's easy to articulate. Now, something that I always make that I have learned is you always have to cite where you get that data from. So rather than saying in my research, you would say, per this report issued last year by the school district, it states, even when you're speaking, because as soon as you remove it to that third party person, it gives it so much more validity.
Mm.
If you need more detailed information, maybe you're talking about food deserts and food banks and hunger rates, go to your health department. There's somebody at the health department that collects all this data and they will give it to you. If you're talking about economic development, community development, go to your Chamber of Commerce, who usually works in conjunction with your economic development. Oftentimes they're in the same building. They have somebody there that collects all of this data as well. So you have access for all of this data. And I always tell people, you're paying for it. You pay for it with your tax dollars. Go use it, go ask for it, don't be shy. And a lot of, if you get to the state level of the schools, you can find a contact person in the data collection department. They'll even run custom reports for you.
Wow.
Mhm.
So do I need a statistics degree in order to interpret the
Nope.
data that comes out of these reports, or is it fairly straightforward?
Is very, very straightforward. So on the school ones, it'll say this is what this national average is, this is what the state average is, and this is where you are in your school. And it's very, very clear and easy to read, and you can present it very clearly. Now, what I always recommend, and this is getting harder and harder to do because most grant applications now are portals. I don't know how I feel about portals every single time, but whenever you can present data in a table or bullet points versus trying to write it out in a narrative, do that. And so that's something too, when you present data, you've got to think about that readability. And so present it almost as clearly as how it's presented in the chart that they'll give to you.
I actually have, so Meg, by the way, wants to say hi. So we'll highlight Meg on screen.
Hello, hi Meg.
It's fascinating. Okay, so I want to, go build these relationships with my health
Mhm.
department. I want to build these relationships with my school. I want to utilize and get access to the data. They're going to provide me with so much data. How do I know what kind of data I need in order to prove that my need is something that exists?
So that's a really good question. And there's not one answer to this. It's kind of like a process. So once you have data that shows, yes, there is a problem in this specific target demographic, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to go fix this problem. Because here's the thing, you've got to show community buy-in. So once you know that problem exists, that's when you've got to go to that community, that target audience, survey them, say, one, do you agree this is a problem? Do you want this problem solved? And what do you think the solution is? How can we work together on providing this solution? Because the research shows that if we come in and just say, oh, we noticed that you have a food desert here, so we're going to have this truck come in on Wednesdays and we're going to hand out free vegetables, but they're not in conjunction with the ethnicity and nobody knows how to cook it, it's going to fail epically. But if you
Mm,
go to them and say, do you agree that maybe it's a struggle to get fresh fruits and vegetables here? And they go, yes. And you say, okay, well, would you like to work on that as a solution? And they say yes. And you're like, well, what would be a good solution for you? Then that's that actual data that you're going to present in conjunction to the founders. Because when you can say, I've already surveyed the target audience, this is what they're saying, and this is the solution, that's the data that you need to present. Now, that sounds really complicated to do. So here's my recommendation on my long answer for this. What you want to do is form a working group or a coalition with several other nonprofits who work with similar target groups in your area. And you want to make sure you all do different things, right? Or serve different areas. And then invite those key data people to that meeting. And you want to meet once a month. And the purpose of that meeting is to get to know each other, know what each other does, learn to speak about each other's work well enough that you can represent them, and form partnerships and collaborations and have access to the data that you need. Out of that information, that working group, you're going to be able to understand in those target populations who the community leaders are. So you don't have to survey the entire community. You can just go directly to those community leaders. Typically, they're elders, they're people of high respect. They might not be like in a high position or wealthy, but they're highly respected in their community. Those are the people that are going to give you the information that you need. And if you can get those people to join that work group, and you can document and prove to the foundations that those people are sitting there every month to giving you, yes, this is working, no, this isn't working, and then how you're pivoting and adapting it, you have the most powerful program. There's no way they can say no to you.
fascinating. Okay, so if I were to pull up step one, so step one is get the problem data, right?
Mhm.
Is whatever problem you're working on, get that data, and it's going to be getting data from your health department. It's going to be getting data from your school. It's going to be getting data by building some of these local relationships. And if you
Correct.
can't get that data from there, while ChatGPT will hallucinate data, so you have to check your source. If you tell ChatGPT the kind of data you're looking for, and that's not available locally, it can usually point out some really good sources,
Mhm.
and you can get some data. Something else I found in the data process is do not aim for perfection, aim for
Correct.
something.
Correct.
Because odds are the data that you want doesn't exist. Like nobody's done the specific study on your specific population and this specific problem and
Right.
this specific outcome, but they've done something that gives you an idea that can get you pretty close. And
Exactly.
now you have something that you can work with. So, if I'm understanding correctly, number one is get problem data. Step number two is actually get community feedback. Wow, I cannot spell community to save my life. Hold on. It is get community feedback. And that's what we're talking about now. So let's talk through. You create this coalition of nonprofits. Cool. Now you all have formed a committee, and committees are absolutely super efficient at accomplishing every task that is ever placed in front of them. So you've got your committee. How do you get community feedback so that you can present this to funders?
Right. So whenever you form a committee or a coalition, I always recommend that you pick a leader, a vice leader, and a secretary. And that's simply because here's the thing, and we all know this, if the job is not assigned, the job does not get done. So you've got to assign jobs. And the reason that you need the leader is because you got to have that one person who talks to the media, that one person who goes out and invites people officially to come in, right? You've got to have that one person who organizes the meeting and send the meeting invites. And the reason that you want the secretary is because by my master's degrees, I am a researcher, and I think you need a paper trail and a secretary that can create a paper trail. And I'm going to be honest, in the day and age that we are in, if you do these committee meetings online, you can probably use an AI to be the secretary and capture the notes. But you want to make sure everybody has those. And by no means does your data need to be perfect. It just needs to indicate that there's a problem. Now, the community feedback, that community buy-in, you want to remember that when you assess these people, and when you give surveys, which I find surveys are usually the easiest thing to do, you want to make them short and sweet, less than 5 questions or less. You want to give them mostly multiple choice and one open-ended question. And you want to keep it short and sweet. And the way that I always got my data was by incorporating this with a community event. Now, you're going to say, well, how do I know what community event to put on as a group? Super easy things that you can pick. At the beginning of the school year, every parent needs help getting back to school supplies. You can do a back to school fair. Around the holidays, everybody needs help with Christmas presents, right? There's always some kind of general community event that you can pull together and put together as that coalition and that group where you can then survey them. And the way that you get the data is you do a passport system. Very easy. You go to the dollar store, you get some different stamps. You take index cards, you assign every station a different stamp, and they have to go to X number of stamps to get the free thing. And that's how you collect that data and also let them know about the services in the community. So it's a win-win organization or a win-win process. And it can be very, very low income because you can do it in a park. It doesn't have to be a lot of work. And those are things that you typically your local media love to cover and will also share the survey online.
What are the questions in this survey? Can you give me an example of a problem that somebody's looking to get some community feedback on how to solve, and what some of the questions might be in that survey?
So what I am seeing a trend in is the cost of housing and transportation versus your income, food deserts, and then also, believe it or not, high school graduation rates. So if we take high school graduation rates, which is going to go in alignment with the sports nonprofit, the questions that you would ask is, do you notice in your community a higher dropout rate? What do you think is causing this dropout rate? Is it X, Y, and Z? If these problems were eliminated, do you think it would be a higher graduation rate? What does it mean to you to not have a high school graduation? And then two, you want to take that same survey and partner with a local high school and give that survey out. And you typically, English classes are a great class to put that out in because almost every student has an English class. You want to make sure that they can do it anonymously. Maybe it's a QR code that the teacher puts up and they scan, and you do it through, I don't know, Doodle Poll or somebody easy, so it's easy to collect. But it's really interesting the feedback that you get because maybe your high school needs a daycare. Maybe your high school needs untraditional hours or a second set of classes because students are missing classes because of taking care of siblings. So it's really interesting what comes out of that and how you can find those solutions.
That is really fascinatingly easy. So you have a passport system. They fill out the survey using the passport system. Now you have all this data. Cool. Right. So what do you do with all of this data that you have now collected to get it into a format that funders are actually going to listen to?
So I would recommend never doing this by yourself this stage. You're always going to want to work with at least one partner, if not a group of people. So out of that committee that you formed for nonprofits, I would ask people who likes to work with data and who wants to join this subcommittee. And you want at least 3 to 4 people. and then ask them to produce reports based on the problems that each of the group is trying to solve, and then give that report, do an overall report and then the individual reports and share those. And
Mm.
honestly, too, another really easy way to do this is if you have a local college, you've got statistics groups or nonprofit classes or some professor that's always looking for real life work. You can almost always get college students to do this data for you too as part of a classroom project.
Oh, that's awesome. Free labor is something that
Mhm.
nonprofits are always looking for. And that's super valuable because then it's not just theory for the kids. They
Right.
actually get to work on something that has a real use later on.
Exactly. Too, you probably don't even have to go to the college level. A lot of people overlook the vocational schools, but vocational schools are super powerful and have very, very bright kids and really advanced classes. And those high school students, typically the teachers are professionals who have like as a second career gone to teaching. And research actually shows that kiddos who go to any kind of vocational school and get that program degree as part of their high school education do better in college because they've been exposed to more real world skills and 21st century skills. And so there's going to be a class at your vocational school that will also do this as a unit.
That's fascinating. Okay. All right. So let's talk about presenting this to funders then. So you
Mhm.
create the problem reports, but obviously no funder wants to read through,
Oh no.
miles and miles of stuff on the problem. So let's talk about actually making this presentable. What do you need to do now with the data to make it presentable to a funder?
Well, sadly, and this is sad for me, maybe not sad for other people. So let me say I'm putting very much my own opinion and emotions in on this. Nobody reads anymore. Nobody does. And nobody reads full sentences. So, of course, you want to give the funder a full copy of that data report because they might want to see it, they might want to use it. But then you need to take and design a one pager that clearly states your name as an organization, your mission statement, your vision statement. And I always encourage you to have both, what your problem statement is as an organization. Then right below that, you want to say, this is the problem we've identified in the community. This is how we got that data. And here is what the data is showing. And then if you can, and this is not my specialty, so you would need somebody else for this, use pie charts or tables to show some of that data at the bottom. Now that
Mm,
is where I have found ChatGPT very helpful, is giving it the data and asking it to make the graph for me. And that has solved so many hours of me crying in Excel. So
oh, that's amazing. I'm totally going to
yeah,
do that.
yeah. And I will also put out, because I'm a huge proponent of AI. ChatGPT is great. Copy AI is also really good for grammar proof checks. But where I do my research is Perplexity. And
Mm,
Perplexity will cite every single one of your sources so you know exactly where it pulled that data from. And so it's also a great place to get you a starting point.
okay. So, what are some of the main questions once you present data to a funder? What are some of the questions they'll ask about your data that you should be prepared to answer? Because these are, kind of common dig down questions from funders.
So the first thing that you need to show is how this aligns with the found. Okay, first let me back up. Let's just use the word funder. It's a generic term here to encompass foundations, corporate sponsorships, corporate donations, and donors. So
Yep.
any one of your donor is going to have a mission statement, something that they are trying to achieve. And so you want to present the data in a way that it shows them that by funding you, they are going to be achieving this goal. And so if you can show that alignment and that they are going to be achieving your data and what the expected timeline is, that's what's going to make them more likely to fund it. An additional piece, which is very, very hard for nonprofits to do because of funding, if you can pull this off, it would be great, is to run a pilot study and show the success of a pilot study. Now, what I always tell people, a pilot study does not have to be full blown. It can be a 2-week pilot study with 10 kiddos. It doesn't have to be the full blown program, just enough to show that it is working. But always show the alignment with the funder and how by funding this it is going to achieve their ultimate goal. That's what they're wanting to hear. The next thing that most people are wanting to hear is, how does this problem personally affect me? Why do I need to care about it? And the way that you answer that is by tracking the solving of this problem to community development and then to economic development. You want to think about it like when you throw a stone into a pond and it creates that ripple effect. You've got your problem, then your community, and then your economic development. It's a public health approach, and you want to show how this problem affects everybody, even indirectly, and how the solution is going to better everything for everyone.
That makes a lot of sense. So I think we're at about a halfway point, and at the halfway point, we do our giveaway. So what do you have to give out to people watching this broadcast who would like to know more and like to be able to actually maybe pull off one of these needs assessments for their issue?
So I created a one pager that documents the process, and it even identifies the key partners that you need to have at the table. Now, when I say key partners, I focused on the data partners. I did not focus on the nonprofit partners because that's going to be different in every area. And then it walks you through exactly what to ask and what to get. So it should give you the format for a work session of setting up a process and gathering this data for community assessment. Because it's just like when I teach strategic planning, your typical strategic plan is 20, 30 pages. It's 3, 5, 10 years, whatever that is, right? You want to get these documents where they're not narratives, they're actually like charts and to-do lists and checklists, and you want to make it very doable and actionable. And so this is going to give you a community assessment that's 1 to 2 pages. If you really like graphs, maybe 5 pages.
Which is excellent, because I've seen community assessments run into the 40 plus pages. And
that is not needed. No.
It just, if there's one thing nonprofits seem to love, it's paperwork.
Yes.
So I just posted that link in the chat. So if you are in the chat, you can go ahead and download that link. And let's also throw your email up, so that if people have questions about this handout, then they can get your email, which is absolutely not that. So give us your email real quick so that people can email you if they have questions.
Do I put it in the comments? I will type it in the comments.
Yeah, go ahead and type it in the comments. That way people can see that.
Oh, I'm not able to. Believe it or not, I'll type it in the private chat.
Type it in the private chat. I will post it into the comments. Excellent. All right. So moving on from this to, all right. So there are other reasons why this is a really fascinating conversation. There are other reasons why funders don't take you seriously, other than just they don't think the problem is well defined. You mentioned one of them, which was like being cutesy, right? So you come across as this, pat you on the head and send you along thing, as opposed to something that's a little bit more serious. What are some of the ways that you can come across as more serious as a nonprofit on that front, even if your goals, your mission are very much around helping kids or helping animals or things like that? What are some of the ways you can come across as more serious when you're talking to a funder, other than just the needs assessment?
So I think the really important thing is to always dress to your audience. So when I was working actively in nonprofits, I would dress one way when I was in programming, and I dressed another way when I went to speak to funders and to do give speeches and things in public. The second is to know your audience, know their vocabulary, know what's important to them, and be able to relate what you're talking about back to them. You also want to have key phrases like research indicates, research has shown, the nonprofit has proven this X, Y, and Z, and you want to be able to say it in ways that it's not your opinion, it's a fact. You also want to be very well prepared for that meeting. So let's say that you are talking about the sports program, you want to have information on X, Y, and Z all the way to how this relates to the elderly program in the neighborhood. You want to be prepared for any question that they can throw at you. As I always tell my daughter, you need to have plan A through Z and be able to fly by the seat of your pants and pivot from one plan to the next. And that's how you prepare and have very good notes. If they ask you a question that you don't know the answer to, never be afraid to say that you don't. Say to them, I am so sorry, I don't have that answer at this time, but if you would meet me at the end of this presentation, or if you would allow me, I will get that answer to you by this time on this day, and then follow up with them. Always follow up with them. Make sure that you have business cards. Make sure that you have a website that is up and proofread. Make sure that your social media is proofread. And have a mixture in your social media, not just of programming, but of facts and data as well. And then always have a board member go with you, which I know is like the hardest thing in the world. But having that board member present with you just further pushes through and validates the program. And if the board member can answer one or two questions, that's even better. So maybe coaching them on some talking points.
Do you think that funders are moving in the direction of wanting to see a lot more impact data or wanting to see a lot more stories?
I think they're wanting to see a combination. I think we need to be careful with the stories where we don't come off too cutesy or emotional, but we also need to remember that in this day and time, especially we're going on day 10 of a government shutdown, that people are jaded and they're tired of problems and they don't care if it doesn't affect them. So that's why I always say you need to have that mixture of stories that are an emotional hook that's backed by data that clearly traces that path back to why this is important to this personal person. And then what I always tell people is it's more about creating connections and relationships. So if you get to go to a funder, if you get to have a meeting with them, pay attention to what's in their background. Look for quick things that you can make a connection on and start building that personal connection and that personal relationship. Another thing that I always tell people, and I see you shaking your head, so Dan, I know you probably preach this, is always send a handwritten thank you card. And what I tell people to do is you don't have to buy a card. I understand that's intimidating. Get postcards. And on the front of that postcard, put the logo and mission statement of your nonprofit. And then on the back, that's just enough room to write a thank you card. You can even pre-write it before the meeting if you want and drop it in the mailbox on the way home from the meeting. Send that follow-up and then make notes. And don't be afraid to take a notepad and pen and take notes with you. Anything you say you're going to provide back, I always tell people you want to over deliver. So tell them, I'll get it to you by Tuesday at 5 if you know you can get it to them Tuesday at noon. So that you're always over delivering.
Okay. So you talk a lot about follow-ups. I almost want to touch on that a little bit. What does, when you're doing major gift fundraising in particular, when you're trying to get actual money coming in for the organization, what does good follow-up look like? Is it just the thank you card? Is there, how long? I get asked all the time, how long does it take? How many meetings should you have with someone when you're asking them for a, $50,000 plus gift or a $20,000 plus gift? What are some insight you can provide on the follow-up with a funder when you feel like you've proven yourself to actually make sure you get that check?
So I keep things very simple. So also let me just divulge here something that I'm very open and honest about. I have severe ADHD. I'm neurodivergent. I operate differently. And the reason that I divulge that in a very
what?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no. Oh, okay.
But I try to be very, very open about that because I want people to see that how successful you can be when you think differently and outside the box. But the best thing you can do is keep things simple. So I always follow the rule of baseball: 3 strikes, you're out. So contact somebody 3 times and do it in a variety of ways. Like I am one, I always overthink and worry that I'm going to interrupt you. So I'm never going to just pick up the phone and call you. I'm either going to send you an email requesting a meeting or send you a text message requesting a meeting, one of those things. Or if all I have is a phone number, I'll call and say, could we schedule a meeting? Now, I'll be prepared to have that conversation at that phone call. I'm just never going to be presumptuous. I always tell my daughter it's so much about manners and respect and being mannerful and being polite and professional. And I think those are skills we've lost out on as well. So, do that initial reach out, then do the meeting where you present, then follow up after that with this is the information that I had, and also follow up with information, follow up with a thank you, and then follow up one last time. And if they don't respond to you after that third time, they're not going to respond to you. I mean, that's my personal opinion. You don't want to be that nag. So then what I do, and this is kind of something that I would love your opinion on. I believe in reporting because I believe the most important way to gain trust is by action, not by words. So I believe that grant report is more important than the actual grant application. But the challenge with a grant report, what I find so frustrating about them, is that it only shows the results of what that grant funded. So fill that grant report out completely. But then every year at the end of your year, be it your fiscal year or your calendar year, put together an action report of what you actually accomplished in that full program year. Keep it short and simple. I'm actually working on one for a client right now. I'm going to make it no more than 2 pages and then send that out to every donor and every foundation. So it's a 2-page letter at max that they can see what the impact of their dollars are. And then also put a little portion in there of what you can expect to see next year. And future funding opportunities. But you definitely want to, and that follow up, I don't count in that baseball strike. I just
Hmm.
count that as information and sending it. And I send it to foundations. What I've been known to do is if I have the time and the strategy, I will send that to foundations before I even call and request a meeting and before I even call or submit a grant application. And you'd be shocked how many times they're like, we don't see you as a client or that you've ever submitted an application. Why did you send that? And I'd be like, because I wanted a chance to get to know you first and present ourselves and build a relationship and learn about you and your foundation and make sure we're a good fit before I submit that application. And it always is a positive conversation with a thank you.
That is brilliant. Sending thank you and like update emails or an update letter on the impact of your organization to people who you haven't yet approached, but you think might be interested in what you're doing. That is fantastic. And I do see that a lot of funders are moving in the direction of, I don't just want every application coming into my inbox. I want to actually talk to you first, or I want to actually see if you're a fit for what we do instead of having to look through your application in order to make that work. Do you see that being a trend in the funding space?
Oh, it's a huge trend, a huge trend. And then because of the cut in federal funds, a lot of foundations are shifting and pivoting very quickly this year to help cover some of those costs. We're seeing a lot of change there. One thing I want to throw out, and this is very powerful in the granting world, is because funders always want to fund the thing that's going to make the largest impact and get the largest results. Think about partnership applications. Like, for example, could the sports program also partner with the food bank and also partner with a mental health association to provide multiple services but still stay in their lane? And a grant would fund 3 different programs. They also like things like that, and they like to see us moving away from the silos because no matter how much I talk about it, nonprofits operate in silos and we've got to break those down.
It almost presents a bit of legitimacy and a bit of fail safes too, right? Because if I fund this in one organization and that one organization doesn't do that program well or goes belly up or whatever, then that's a real problem. But if I fund this to 3 different organizations and at least 2 of the 3 parts work, then that's still a huge win in the funder's mind. That makes a lot of sense. So what else do you want listeners to know about really stepping up and showing that you are the kind of organization that needs to be funded when you walk in to meet with a funder?
I think don't be afraid of your failures. Like, failure is a great, great thing in the nonprofit world, and be able to talk about programs that didn't go quite as planned and how you pivoted and adapted. And you want to think a little bit more like a business than a nonprofit that way, so that you can show them, halfway through the program, we realized X wasn't working. So we pivoted and did Y. They're going to respect you for that honesty and transparency, but they're also going to respect you for having more of that business mind and being able to pivot and adapt, because so many nonprofits, even in 2025, will still say to me, this is the way we've always done it. We can't change. You have to change. You have to stay modern with the times, and you have to understand that failure is nothing to be afraid of. It's nothing to be ashamed of, and even talk about it, because that will make foundations more interested in you because of your honesty.
That is really, really good advice. So, really quick before we go, summarize the kind of 5 key steps that you go through in order to make yourself, make it clear that your need is fundable and your organization is fundable.
1, find the data in your community. 2, survey the target audience you will be serving to make sure that this is the solution that they want. 3, if possible, find a similar program in a similar community that has worked to present the success data from them. 4, clearly trace a path of how solving this problem will positively impact community residents, community development, economic development, and lower crime rates. And then 5, be able to present it in a clear way where you can articulate data and stories in a way to engage your audience in their own vocabulary.
That is awesome, clear, and concise. Thank you so much for coming on the Friday Expert live stream. We've got a few comments. I'll just show real quick. Kimberly says, thank you. It was very helpful. And of course, Meg, always the encourager, is very happy with your follow-up strategy. This has been the Friday Expert live stream. We don't have one set up for next week. I'll get back with you if that changes. But you all have a wonderful weekend, and there should be something pithy that I say at the end of these. But I'll just point back. There's a sign. There's a sign there, and the sign says charity, which is crossed out, and it has impact underneath it. Remember that. Remember that in your funder conversations. Remember that going forward, and you will get the funding you need for your program. Thank you again, Sarah, for joining us.
Thank you for
And
having me.
y'all have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I'll see you next time.